Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. The topic for today's webinar is Soleil Lofts, the largest solar plus storage virtual power plant in the country. Today's webinar is presented by Clean Energy Group's Resilient Power Project, and we have a number of excellent guest speakers with us today. Before I pass it over to them, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. All of our attendees for this webinar are in listen-only mode. You have a couple of options to join the audio portion of today's webinar. You can call in using your computer, mic, and speakers, or you can use your telephone to connect. If you'd like to view the webinar presentation full screen, you can minimize your webinar console by clicking on the orange arrow that you see circled here. You can also click on that arrow to expand the webinar console once again. A very important note, we ask that you please submit your questions and your comments throughout the webinar by typing them into the question box on the webinar console and hitting send. We are going to save about 15 or so minutes at the end of the webinar to address questions from the audience. And to make sure that we get to your question, type it in right when you think of it. Don't wait until the very end. We do have a lot of people registered for the webinar, so we expect to have a lot of questions. Again, type your question in early so to give yourself a good chance of getting it answered. A final note, this webinar is being recorded. We will send you an email probably this afternoon with a link to the webinar recording and a PDF of the slides. We'll also be posting all of those materials on our website at cleanegroup.org/webinars. So with that, I would like to pass it over to our moderator for today's webinar, Seth Mullendor. Seth is a Vice President and Project Director here at Clean Energy Group, and he is going to tell you more about Clean Energy Group and give you some background about today's webinar, and then he will introduce our speakers. So over to you, Seth.
Thank you, Sam, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. As Sam said, I think this is going to be a really great webinar today. So a little bit of background about who we are here. Clean Energy Group, we are a national nonprofit based in Vermont, but we work all throughout the country and a little bit internationally. Been around for about 20 years now. We also have a sister organization called the Clean Energy States Alliance. It's a membership organization of agencies that manage statewide clean energy funds. A lot of state agencies or energy offices are part of that coalition. Clean Energy Group, we are primarily funded by private foundations, and you can see some of our primary funders here on this screen that are funding our work. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about one of our main projects, which is the Resilient Power Project. This webinar today is brought to you by the Resilient Power Project. Resilient Power Project has been around for about 6 years now. The goal of that work is to increase access to solar and energy storage for resilience among low-income and otherwise disadvantaged communities. It really came about in the wake of Superstorm Sandy and the outages that happened in the Northeast, but the work has spread across the United States, and we work in most states right now. We've done some work. So the Resilient Power Project works to try to get the right policies and regulatory and market structures in place to make sure that the benefits of solar and storage reach the most vulnerable citizens, frontline communities. We also do a lot of analysis and reporting and information sharing. A few of our reports are located along the bottom there, and those are all available at the project website, resilient-power.org. We also work a lot on the individual project level, where we really act as facilitators in that process. Since the project started, we worked on over 150 projects across the country as kind of assisting the project in various forms. So each dot represents some projects that we worked on in various respects, and highlighted are a few projects that we've worked on across the country. We work a lot with affordable housing and critical service providers, which can range anything from, say, a community shelter that works as a emergency shelter in an outage situation, to food kitchens, upwards of first responders, and even hospitals that we've worked with across the country. So if you have a project that you're interested in working with us on, please let us know. We provide both in-house assistance and sometimes grant support to help move those along. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. We are lucky enough to have three great speakers. First up is going to be Olaf Lohr and Ani Baca from Sonnen. Olaf is the manager of utility relations at Sonnen, and he provides leadership for Sonnen's expansion into specific U.S. markets and is developing business partnerships with utilities. Some of the highlights from the work that Olaf has done is the McKnight Lane project in Vermont, which worked on with Clean Energy Group. That was the first net zero modular home community in the United States. It was a redevelopment of a defunct mobile home park. And it features utility interactive battery storage virtual power plant from Sonnen that works with Green Mountain Power, the utility here in Vermont. Also worked on the smart home study with Itron in California that had a goal of countering the duck curve through smart energy management of behind-the-meter assets. Ani Baca is Director of Regulatory, Legislative, and Utility Initiatives at Sonnen, and she works on virtual power plants, EV charging software, and hardware technologies for behind the meter. She leads the strategy and implementation of large-scale projects with utilities, munis, co-ops, and community choice aggregators around the U.S. and in Canada, and she's part of the Sonnen Global E-Services organization. Prior to joining Sonnen, Ani managed business and governmental affairs and rose to Assistant General Counsel for Xcel Energy. And as an attorney specializing in renewable energy for one of the largest utilities in the U.S., Ani's experience combines in-depth understanding of market and technology applications in the residential arena, as well as breakthrough technologies and successful platforms. Then we're going to have a presentation by Jason Grimes, and he is the Director of Product Development and Special Projects at Auric Energy. He's been with Auric Energy since 2014 within the role of Director of Engineering until recently, where his role changed to focus on the technical support and development of special projects and solutions. Jason is a master electrician with a deep background in solar, energy storage, and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. He is deeply passionate about renewable energy and helping it become a standard way of life for everyone. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Olaf and Ani.
Thank you so much, Seth. I really appreciate it. Do me a favor, can you go back to the slide in which you listed the studies that the Clean Energy Group has undertaken? So it's probably 2 slides prior to the cover for Sonnen. Yes, so the Resilient Power Project, nope, one further, yep. The reason why I wanted you to actually go back to the slide is because in our line of work, in the line of work with Olaf and myself, and I'll delve into the Soleil project in more detail in a second, we use all the market intelligence that we can gather. We use all the possible case studies. Today we're going to talk about our case study, but we couldn't do the work that we do at a scale without the opportunity to consult veritable, verifiable, as well as really concerted efforts by the Clean Energy Group and others such as yourself, and specifically because our focus is very heavily right now in California with what's happening with the wildfires, as well as in bridging the gap with low-income housing and affordable housing. I very highly recommend that you read all of the studies at the bottom of the page, but certainly you want to consult the Closing the California Clean Energy Divide. I was absolutely very impressed with that study, and it's actually created the backbone for a lot of the planning, the strategic planning that we've done in California, as well as how we are building our deals. So I wanted to give you a shout out because it's really, really important that this information is out there. It is very accessible, and I'd encourage everyone on this call to consult those resources. So if you don't mind jumping into the first slide for Sonnen. Wasatch VPP, the Soleil Lofts. I am proud to say that this was my very first project that I worked on at Sonnen after I left Xcel and the law firm that I worked in for a very short stint, which is one of the largest renewable energy firms in the country, Stoll Reeves. the capacity in which I worked on this project, and Olaf and I, as well as Jason, who's going to speak about this in a minute, it takes a large team of various talents and various ideas to actually put a project of this size together. I worked on the ideation of the economic levers for this project. It's no myth that residential battery storage projects do not pencil out on cursory information. You have to be really, really creative. You have to be very persuasive, and you have to be very persistent. And you also have to consider scale in building a project of this size. All of those elements came together, but they couldn't happen without, one, having a great partner in Olaf Lohr in my team, who's worked on various technical aspects of the project, and also having a absolute great partner in Auric, who's also part of this presentation. It's the strategic partnerships in this project that brought it together. Seth, thank you for the introduction of myself and Olaf. To be clear, we are sort of like two sides of the same coin at Sonnen. I lead our team of two. We do great things together. We make a very good use of our time and resources, and we also have the benefit of not just being part of the Sonnen US, but also being part of the global organization at Sonnen, which is called e-services or energy services. There, we marry the combination of scale in hardware with formidable virtual power plant software layered on top. And that's how we build this project. A bit about Sonnen: we're founded in Germany by the two gentlemen that you see on the right-hand side in 2008, and we are about to celebrate more than 10 years of being in existence. The world leader in residential energy storage, we focus very heavily in being the best in the market. We have the most number of installed systems worldwide. The 55,000 number, I'm sure it's going to be different this year and much higher. We consider our systems numbers not when they are sold. Those numbers don't matter. It's when they are installed and they are working great for our customers. That number does matter. We started out by being engineered and manufactured outside of the US, and then we moved our operations, and that's when my dear colleague Olaf Lohr actually started getting involved with Sonnen in 2013 in California. Now we have an entire innovation hub dedicated to engineering and manufacturing our hardware in the United States in Tucker, Georgia. We have products that will that run the gamut of they're called Eco and EcoLink. They essentially are created with a couple of criteria in mind: the mass market or our residential customers, and kind of the use cases that they need to use them for, as well as the future in terms of the automated home, and that's the EcoLink line as well. We were the first energy storage system to build a companion home automation platform. The reason why this is important is that fundamentally we are a technology company that has grown and will continue to grow in the project development phase. So technology is first and foremost in our minds, and that's where we do a lot of our innovation. And then the Ani and Olaf team are tasked with engineering and innovating in the business development arena, and that's how Soleil Lofts came together. As I mentioned, we have a virtual power plant software, which resides in Germany. We have a large team of software engineers, inclusive of one of the preeminent brains in blockchain technology in Europe. We were proud to be acquired by Shell New Energies in 2019. With the addition to the Shell family, we've had the opportunity to essentially benefit from a lot of knowledge and experience that resides with our colleagues. Very quickly, Seth, again, thank you for the introduction. What was not said is that I live in Minneapolis, where it's really, really cold. We get a lot of snow. I live there with my husband, and we both love the outdoors. And I tell anyone willing to listen, there is no better meditation than ice fishing on a really cold day in Minnesota on a frozen lake. And I've included my email here so that you can reach us. And then Olaf Lohr is responsible for business development, and Seth mentioned Olaf's achievements, and there are many of them. and they are really great, and they continue to enrich the work that we do in the U.S. Next slide, please. So we started out with the idea that with the addition of residential battery storage, we don't think that there can be a future in the energy transition to more renewable, reliable, and resilient systems without the increased presence of virtual power plants. A virtual power plant is an aggregation and control of small systems, residential battery systems. And the unfortunate thing is that I clicked on my browser and I definitely lost the slide. Essentially what we do is we put all of these residential battery systems in customers' homes, and then we aggregate them, as I mentioned before, through the software. What happens in this process is that there are a few stakeholders to think of. The number one and the most important stakeholder is the residential homeowner, with their needs for self-consumption and for offsetting their battery use, their energy use. Another very important and crucial stakeholder in this process is the residential developer and builder who will bring these projects online. And then we work greatly where we have the opportunity to do so with enlightened utilities, co-ops, and CCAs around the country to be able to bring this project forward. Next slide, please. So very quickly on the Soleil Lofts, the first all-electric apartment community in the United States. That is also a utility-controlled virtual power plant. So to be clear, every apartment in this complex has a battery in it. The complex itself, on the left-hand side, you have a picture of the apartment building. It has solar on the rooftop. The solar on the rooftop is used to offset the energy needs for the common areas of the complex. The batteries in every single apartment, whether it's a one-bedroom or a three-bedroom apartment, serve the needs of the residential customer. But then what we did is we strategically partnered with Auric, Wasatch, the development group that developed the project, as well as the Rocky Mountain Power. And what the utility is doing, so Rocky Mountain Power, is essentially gaining control of the virtual power plant, this aggregation of batteries, and is using it to essentially offset frequency deregulation in their system. Utah suffers from frequency fluctuations as well as voltage fluctuations. So essentially, by becoming a stakeholder, by becoming a partner in this particular project, the utility took on the role of also becoming a very much of a hands-on player on the aggregation of these batteries and in their use as an asset for the utility system. This is a very quick note to the attendants. If there are any questions, you are on mute, but if there are any questions, feel free to use the type of message here on the right-hand side on the chat. I will have a close eye on this as we move forward, or Seth, maybe you want to recommend a later time to do that. But should any thoughts come to mind, or if we are not covering neither myself nor Ola, feel free to type a question in the questions component on the right-hand side of the screen. Can you move to the next slide, please? So this is literally, this is what an apartment, the interior of an apartment looks like at Soleil Lofts. And those batteries look really beautiful. And in addition to the space, the great thing about putting these batteries in a space when the project has been built is they sort of became part of increasing the efficiency of the space as well as the design. Next slide, please.
And maybe directly to Soleil Lofts, how this looks from a renter's perspective is that the development features studios, 1-, 2-, and 3-bedroom apartments. one of the features that we're very proud of is that the apartments are very affordable. So they start at the low $1,000 range, and even the largest apartments are under $2,000. So it's very affordable, and of course it includes almost free energy. It is located about half an hour south of Salt Lake City Center. It's very close to the Science Bank Stadium, and the apartment complex also features innovative services, grocery, smart home feature, and a community app.
So Olaf, if you want to go into this slide in more detail.
Sure. So how Soleil Lofts came together, one of the offsets is that actually Salt Lake City has a very bad air quality. So in 2019, for example, the air quality index reached 150, which is considered unhealthy, and that's about 9 times the particulate matter of Los Angeles. And so therefore, the Wasatch Group, and especially Deloitte Hanson's vision of improving the air quality on the Wasatch front was to create an all-electric community that provides benefits to the tenants, the utility, the builder, and the greater good. So the vision really brought together the different players, which are the Wasatch Group, which is a very large community apartment housing developer featuring over 15,000 apartments throughout the U.S. Rocky Mountain Power, which is a vertically integrated utility serving over 1.1 million customers in Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho. Then Auric Energy, which we will hear later about, full service provider, operational in 4 states on the residential side, and then sonnen Codale, of course, as the distribution partner. All of those players came together, showed a great commitment to the project, and then of course Rocky Mountain Power decided to step in, embrace the idea, and bring the residential PPP idea to life together with sonnen and our technology.
So the economics of this project actually came together, and so the slide mentions the tremendous and enduring will displayed by the key players. Rocky Mountain Power is a vertically integrated utility, and they are very heavily regulated. One of the levers that we wanted to use from the economics of the project was actually the opportunity to use certain innovation funds that were slated for use by Rocky Mountain Power. But in order to get access to those funds, Rocky Mountain Power needed to go in front of the regulators, therefore set up a date to be able to do so, file arguments as to why access to the funds would be useful for this project, and also the historic value of this project, and that it could be one of the projects that could essentially create a platform that could be replicated in the future. During that process, as the project is being developed and built, Rocky Mountain Power was also having to make the case in front of the regulators as to why usage of the funds would be beneficial to all of their customer base. And so once we gained access to the grant, then the project was a go. But the grant money was the way that Rocky Mountain Power could afford to participate in the project, as well as just create their very first foray into this collaboration, which we know is going to grow to a much larger extent in the not so distant future. Next slide, Olaf. And Olaf, if you want to go through this one.
Sure. And so just as a summary of Soleil Lofts itself, so it's an all-electric, carbon-neutral residential apartment community, which will be utilized with the VPP software that really features the first utility interactive sonnen community in the US that is going to be operational. It also constitutes the largest of such projects in the US, and it has 5 megawatts of solar, 12.5 megawatt-hours of energy storage inside, which will be managed by Rocky Mountain Power. Important to know is that the Rocky Mountain Power will manage the VPP as a grid resource. That is also on the background that Utah is joining potentially the Western Energy Imbalance Market, and therefore will provide a great potential asset going forward. The total complex is spread out over 22 buildings, over 600 apartments of various sizes, a clubhouse, and very important are actually the EV charging infrastructure that's being put in throughout the development. Of course, the partnership model, we covered that, but wanted to point out also the backup power for residents that is going to be available if and when the power is out. In Utah, we actually see a pretty reliable grid, but at the same time, as this project provides a carbon footprint, a carbon copy for other projects, especially in California, this value proposition for the residents is going to be very, very important, and a great capability to back up each individual apartment for the end customers, and at the same time develop or deliver demand response for the local utility. So if you would like to have an overview of the project itself, there is actually a link here that allows you to really see the project itself. You can even find a link to rent the apartments there. So let's see. It seems like Ani just got cut off from the audio. Very important is also that Rocky Mountain Power received a step fund mandate, and that provides Rocky Mountain Power with the full control of the Soleil Lofts fleet with the software, and will further integrate it into all of their grid operations. Great from the end customer perspective is that they are receiving a lower cost of energy than what they would normally pay. And so that's going to be a combined bill savings for everybody who's living in the Wasatch, in the Soleil Lofts development. Last but not least, would point out that for the Wasatch Group, there is an 8% plus overall project IRR capitalized over 25 years. So that speaks to the capabilities of sonnen, of the longevity of our technology, and that is fully backed by sonnen, by our warranty for that project.
I think one of the fundamental features of this project is, we mentioned in the beginning that it took quite a few partners coming together to create a value proposition that worked so well in the end as a win-win for all. The structure of this project that we are aware of has never been put together before, at least not in the U.S. residential market in a VPP setting of this kind. So essentially, what we wanted to do is create a platform where then we can home in further on the economics. It took a lot of courage to get this project off the ground. Because again, when you are the one to go first, particularly with so many moving pieces, there's a lot of creativity that goes into the mix, but there's also a lot of courage on the side of each and every single one partner in their involvement in the project, as well as in taking on some of the financial risk as well. So we are very cognizant that this probably would not have come together the way it did, at the margins that it did, without having had such a hand-in-glove relationship between all of our partners.
Absolutely. I
Next
couldn't
slide,
have said this better.
So it's really great when you create a project like this, and then the media starts to cover it and covers it with over 60 global articles. The only reason why this statistic is of any significance is because, again, this is Soleil Lofts in Utah, half an hour outside of Salt Lake City. These are apartments that are for rent. And so from in other words, it could have very easily gone unnoticed. But what everyone that has been involved in covering the story has been absolutely enamored with, as well as wanting to cover, is the whole idea of all the value propositions that we put in front of you today, which is the win-win for the residential customers, their quality of life, for the local utility, for our partners, one of whom is on this call and will speak next, Auric, as well as for the state of Utah itself. And from a legislative perspective, also it showcases the idea that you make funds available in the area of innovation and energy, and great things happen, such as the STEP grant that we were able to use here. Olaf and I are motivated by one mission, and that's why we left our jobs elsewhere to come and work at Sonnen, which is clean and affordable energy for everyone. And that means whether you are a wealthy suburban customer that has the ability to afford residential battery storage and wants the best technology in the market, but more importantly for us, it's about all of those residential classes having the opportunity, and by class I mean that's how utilities classify customers, having the opportunity to have access to renewable energy even when you live in multifamily housing, through solar on the rooftop, having the ability to harness that renewable energy through battery storage to offset self-consumption, lower your energy bills, and really be part of a community that shares with you certain common goals on making this planet a better one for everyone, a greener one, and certainly being part of the affordable answer to renewable energy in the future. And that concludes the Sonnen presentation. Again, we're looking forward to your questions at the end of the presentations, but for now, we are going to turn it over to you, Seth.
Thank you very much, Ani and Olaf. That was a great presentation, and we already got a ton of questions. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jason to present on Auric Energy and the solar component of the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Ani and Olaf. A great presentation. My name is Jason Grimes with Auric Energy. I'm the Director of Product Development and Special Projects. For my role, I was really involved with the construction of the project, the initial design, trying to come up with solutions that just really didn't exist before with a project like this. It all started with a customer of ours that had a great vision. That would be Deloy Hansen. Deloy really exemplifies his stewardship of this planet, and his legacy he wants to leave behind is to leave it better than it was before. He's got a lot of grandchildren, and this really is a very personal goal of his, and he put his money where his mouth is and made this project happen. Without that brave sacrifice that he made for a project that had so much risk, we'd really like to thank Mr. Hansen for that. I can talk about a little bit about the project development and the construction of it. It all started with our customer who had the vision. He didn't know how to get there, but he knew what the vision was. He was laser focused on that. Our role as Auric Energy, we're an EPC, renewable energy EPC located in the Mountain West. And what we think of as an EPC is that we're really a solution provider. We're here to understand issues, groups issues, what they need to have done, and we're there to provide solutions. And so we went into this just thinking incredibly dynamically, like how are we going to do this? There were so many iterations of the design that it was countless, and how do we start and where do we start? We really listened to the customer to understand his goal and his need, because after all, we need to perform on those expectations. Through listening to the customer, we determined that this structure of this project would serve the needs best. And this took time. This took a lot of time, a lot of conversations with the local utility. Just as a little point, the location of this site is in Herriman, Utah, which is probably one of the fastest growing areas in all of the Salt Lake Valley. And you can imagine the utility having to deal with the infrastructure going in on an area that was rural up until just a number of years ago. And then also the location is really close to what we call Silicon Slopes here in Utah, which is a very high-tech area that also demands a lot of power. So the utility had a lot of challenges with this physical location as well. And just through the incredible intelligence of all of these partners involved, it was identified that the utility could benefit from a deployment of a project of this type, which was just a win-win-win for everybody involved. Dynamic thinking and problem solving really had to be a fundamental key point on this entire project. Like I said, we were doing things that hadn't been done before. And what I mean by that is, as any contractor knows, you design a project and then you have to get it approved and pass through a building review with the local building officials. Some of the aspects of this project didn't really align with the National Electric Code or the adopted version of the code for that particular location. And so we had to really work hand in hand with the local building officials to not only educate, but to help and work with and understand their fears or their what was important to them to get this to go. Because of course, you know, safety, public safety is paramount. That's something that we can really thank Sonnen for, was their decision on their battery chemistry as the safest chemistry available for this product. That's what Sonnen chose, and obviously safety is probably the number one point that we all had to cover under any condition. Design and engineering. Like I said, Sonnen came into this as a true partner. They not only had a product, but they opened their doors to the wealth of knowledge of what their engineering teams could do and what the capabilities of their product could do. And they helped all partners involved, from the customer to the utility to us as the EPC, to help develop this entire project. This wouldn't have happened without close coordination and collaboration with Sonnen, with the utility, building officials, subcontractors, everything. It was really a group effort. The plans review was one challenge we had was, like I said, where we may have exceeded what the National Electric Code may have intended for a battery system deployed into a house or a business. And a way that we worked that out was we thought creatively and we consulted with a local building official to really get behind what is important to firefighter safety, to building codes, to electrical codes. And we really went into a lot of depth and collaborated with everybody involved to come up with solutions that would appease the safety factor, and so it could be duplicatable as well. So we were leaning out there on the edge of what's been done and what hasn't been done. Again, this goes to the courage of the of Deloy Hansen to invest his money into a project that had so much risk. But when collaboration is transparent and everybody's involved, and we bring the problems to the forefront instead of hiding behind them, this is truly the only way that projects like this can move forward. Let's see, things that were also a challenge. You can see from the pictures that this is a pretty high density housing area. There is no space. It's a beautiful location. Everything is meticulously manicured. All of the beds, the walkways, the grass, the open areas, the architecture of the building, it's just gorgeous. But when you're adding solar and energy storage to a project, you're bringing a whole bunch of equipment along with it. There's boxes, there's conduit, there's big pieces of equipment that have to go somewhere. So trying to figure out how to add a whole bunch of electrical equipment, solar panels, solar arrays, batteries, where do we put all these things? And that was another example of really keen collaboration with the original site architect, the original engineers, the electrical engineers that developed the site, how they could help redesign their system to allow us to get equipment into locations. Batteries, everything takes space. We call it real estate, and you've got to have real estate. And if you don't, you've got a real problem. So collaboration again. The finished product, it must meet or exceed the customer's expectations. That was our shining star. We had to perform. We had to help our customer with this grand vision, and we had to perform. So making sure that we did everything in a safe manner, safety was paramount above all else. It really took a lot of collaboration. I can't tell you how many iterations of design we went through, the back and the forth, but every partner was committed. Everyone stepped up. Everyone went to those late meetings and stayed extra hours to help develop this project. And no one group can do a project of this scope and this scale alone. It really takes a very open and truthful conversation with partners to identify what their need is. How can they win from this project? We can't be one-sided. We can't push a project in a box that it just doesn't fit. We've got to make sure that we talk to everybody and understand how we can provide a solution across the board. And again, I keep coming back to it, but it was partnerships and collaboration. Without Sonnen, without the great partner in Deloy Hansen, without our wonderful local utility, who we really need to give them a lot of credit. They didn't have to get involved with this. They took a lot of risk upon themselves to invest into this project, and I believe that they were included and involved in such a way that they will truly be able to gain value and help further other projects of this scope along. I know I've been missing my slides here, but really I wanted to talk about the construction of the project and all of the challenges that went with it. We can overcome anything. It just takes thinking outside of the box to get these things through. We have a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of wonderful partners out there. Open your mind. If you find yourself saying, this is how we've always done it, we're going to do it this way, that can be a real trap. You've got to think dynamically. You have to think about the future. You have to think about the generations that are going to be living in these apartments and utilizing this equipment. Another neat thing about this project is the entire site it's not a microgrid. It does not disconnect itself from the utility as a site, but every single of the 600 apartments plus the clubhouse will be able to island on their own. It means that so we're in Utah here, right on the Wasatch Front, which is a major earthquake fault. So this is always in our minds, like what happens in the event of a grand emergency, a hurricane, a fire, an earthquake. What do we do? These 600 apartment units will not only be able to provide power for themselves, their families, but they would also be able to provide some security to the neighborhoods around them through, maybe people could come and charge their cell phones to get information, to feel safe, to communicate with the outside world. So we've created a real spot within the community that can share a sense of safety and power. When we have power, when we have lights we can turn on, it can really make the boogeyman go away. And this is just something, this is one little piece that we can do to help this. With Sonnen's technology of being able to network their devices across a geographic area, it really solidified their ability to be the right product for a project such as this, because these units I know they're all independent, but they react as a single unit. And it's just fundamentally amazing of what we can do. In some of these pictures, you can see some of the construction. Every single apartment, in this picture here, that's the top of the building. So we had to fill up all the space we could to get as much solar as we could. These are carports down here. Every single apartment has its own portion of an array. So every single apartment in the event of a grid failure has its own PV array, and it has its own energy storage. It's a virtual off-grid apartment, every single one. So look at the redundancy we have here. If any single inverter were to fail, they've got hundreds of others around them that can continue to provide power. Just a couple of pictures here. I like to see construction. It's great to see all the wonderful pictures at the end that they're polished and beautiful, but the construction pictures can show the challenges. For example, on the roof here, every building's got HVAC units and all kinds of vents and piping and whatnot. And you can imagine the collaboration that we had to have between all trades involved with this project to make sure that things fit and that they function properly and they didn't impede on other trades. Here you can see a carport. The carports are just absolutely gorgeous, by the way. The finish, it's just truly a stunning project to behold. Just some more pictures of the construction. You can see some of the buildings in the background with the carports as this is going up. And this is also right across the street from another one of Deloy Hansen's properties, which is the Real Training Center. It's the largest indoor major league, 2 soccer fields side by side in a steel building that has like another megawatt of solar on top of that. So Deloy is creating a real energy safe house here in Herriman, Utah, which has high development, and he's able to help the utility offset that incredible demand that they're seeing in an area, like I said, that was otherwise undeveloped until just recently. I can't speak to the economics as much from the Auric perspective on here, but I will leave a email address that if there's anybody that's interested in more of the economics of the project from the view of the renewable energy EPC, we're happy to share that information with you. And I think that's about it for the construction. Again, it all comes down to customer expectation, coordination, and collaboration. And we're very proud to be a part of this project. We're very proud to be working with Sonnen, with Wasatch Group, with Rocky Mountain Power. Truly, without any of these partners, this project would not have happened. Seth, am I doing okay on time? I think I'm
Yeah, I think we're all set. If that's all right with you, we'll move on to questions. Okay.
Very good.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. We had a lot of questions come in. We are going to stay over a little bit because folks have some time. They can stay on. We've got more questions already than we can get to, but we're going to dive into it now. Jason, I'm glad you mentioned the resilience side. We had a lot of questions come in about that. Maybe folks can weigh in a bit more on how that works exactly. So it sounds like there are panels devoted to specifically to each apartment, and we know each apartment has a sonnen unit in the apartment. Can you talk about how that wiring is done? Are there parts of the solar that are just going to the community spaces and individual units? And then in the event of an outage, is the unit fully powered, or is it some subset of loads that are powered? We can get into that a little bit more. There are a lot of questions that came in on that.
Excellent. Yeah. What's unique about this site is that every single apartment in this entire site, there's like, I don't know how many buildings, maybe 40-something buildings and 600 apartments spread across the site. Every single apartment has its very own solar array, and that can be spread either on the building or to the carports that surround the building. So every apartment has its solar array, which feeds into a SMA Sunny Boy inverter, a grid-tied inverter. And that grid-tied inverter is AC coupled to the sonnen battery. These sonnen batteries are the 20 kilowatt-hour version of the EcoLinks. And the EcoLinks has a 8 kilowatt power output. So we had to size the PV arrays to the battery, and if the loads are split, I don't know if I can answer that one right away. I'd be happy to provide that information. Earlier, I mentioned that it took a lot of coordination with the electrical engineer of the site, because there were months of back and forth of how we can become more efficient, how we can put in different appliances, how we can reduce loads, because we all know that every dollar spent in energy efficiency can save $5 or $10 on renewable energy. We know that that's a fact. And then also a limiting factor was area. We didn't have enough area, or a lot of area, to put in multi-megawatts of extra solar. So we had to be incredibly selective and incredibly detailed. What we did was we maximized the PV arrays to the sonnen battery, to what they could take. And then we worked from there. We looked at the loads in each unit to help reduce those loads, to get them down to where the sonnen unit could run the entire property, the entire apartment in an off-grid outage situation. It would be very common to load shed. Of course, air conditioning, heating, cooking, sometimes these loads can exceed the rating of most inverters that are out there for single-phase applications. And so we have to be very careful about our product selection. We had the benefit of going into a new build, which is completely different than going into a retrofit. So smart panel technology, meaning load shedding breakers, smart load shedding or load shifting, this would really be required for any project.
Great. I know Olaf and Ani, did you guys want to weigh in on this at all as well?
That was very comprehensive.
Okay, great. I did have a question about the battery specifically. There were some questions asking about just the technology that sonnen uses for their batteries, and safety did come up in the webinar, and there were some questions about the having batteries inside and safety concerns about fire safety, and also indoor air quality, if there are any effects of that of the battery as well. So Ani and Olaf.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, sonnen is utilizing a lithium iron phosphate technology in our battery modules for each and every product that we have built and shipped here in the United States. It is really giving us the advantage of providing a very, very long-lasting technology, very long-lasting and low degradation battery pack. At the same time, it exceeds any safety aspect and it's really best in class. It doesn't feature thermal runaway and therefore is extremely safe and the best product that we can put in a home. So that is paired, of course, with our other safety layers that we put around the our battery management system. It's fully enclosed, so there's no off-gassing or venting or no off-gassing from the battery packs themselves. So therefore, it will not affect the air quality. And all around, this is really a product that we're very comfortable putting into our homes, that our CTO is comfortable putting into his home. And of course, for a project of that size, that is a very, very important aspect. But yeah, we feel very confident about that.
Olaf, you have one of these in your home?
Yeah, I've had various iterations of this one in my house here in California, and yeah, it is really a great companion.
Great. So we had some questions about, I'm going to combine a few here together. One, ownership of the batteries, who actually owns the battery assets, and then who's responsible for the maintenance of the battery throughout its useful life, and then at the end of life, what happens to the battery, who's responsible for that, and along with that, what is the expected lifetime of the battery systems?
Sure, I'll take this one, unless Jason, you want to jump in?
Go ahead.
So, okay. To the extent that we can reveal information that is pertinent to the project that is not confidential, I can share that the batteries are owned by the Wasatch Group, who is the developer. Sonnen is going to remain, because of the virtual power plant aspect of this project, Sonnen is going to remain responsible, engaged, and willingly so for the entire life of the project in terms of providing any maintenance. The great thing about the EcoLinks is that we put all of our dedication, resources, and a lot of time into manufacturing and building the best battery. So from an O&M perspective, we foresee very little need for maintenance. However, from a responsibility perspective, that would be the responsibility of Sonnen. What happens at the end of life of the battery, a lot of the components of the battery, so we decommission them ourselves, Sonnen does, and a lot of the components of the battery are also recyclable. And once they are recycled, then you get a certificate of recycling. We are aiming to get our batteries to be 100% recyclable, but at this point, I cannot give out a percentage of how much of the battery can be recycled at the end of life.
Great. And do you have an expected when that replacement would happen, or do you have an estimate of that for these projects?
Well, I mean, generally projects with an EcoLink are warranted for between 10 to 20 years. And so should there be a need for a replacement, then you are looking at the very tail end of that, which would be around 20 years. There shouldn't be a need for a replacement any time prior to that.
Great, thanks. So I have some questions about how the batteries interact with the solar asset. So are the batteries predominantly or solely charged by the on-site solar, or is it grid energy? How does that work? And also then how is the solar crediting work? Does that automatically get credited to individual apartments, or how does the billing there work in combination with the solar?
Yeah, so
Jason?
I'll take the first portion and then pass it on to Jason on the project specifics. So the sonnen batteries are capable of measuring the input from solar and the load drawn from the facility. And so our BMS measures and weighs, and that makes a decision to charge and discharge. And with that, we achieve like a very high self-consumption rate, meaning that we utilize most of the on-site solar that's available. and reduce export into the grid, and also offset most of the loads from self-generated power. And that typically is paired with the very specific rates that are available in the different markets to optimize therefore. And so maybe Jason, you can speak on how that co-optimization is being executed direct here at Soleil Lofts.
Yes, thank you. Typically, to meet the ITC, the energy storage is required to charge from the solar, and those details can be found on the ITC website. This particular site, I can't speak on the exact functionality because we have such a collaboration with the utility. They've been given a lot of control over these batteries, so they're able to charge and discharge them in a way that can benefit the utility. I don't know specifically on that. I think that would probably be a better question for the utility as far as how they're actually going to deploy the energy of these batteries. Because remember, I think it's about 50% of the capacity of this battery. These are 20 kilowatt hour sonnen EcoLinks batteries, and I think about half of that capacity is available to the utility, which is just unbelievably cool. And how they charge and discharge, I can't speak specifically, but in a typical situation, we're always looking to charge the batteries from renewable sources, and there's quite a bit of solar on this site. And if you look at sun hours for the location, it shouldn't be any problem to, if you had to cycle these batteries in a day, that in good sun hour days, you're going to be charging these up, no problem.
So Jason, is the solar then directly offsetting the individual consumption in the units, or is that being done? Is crediting being done through the utility, or how's that working?
Yeah, so the batteries have both production and consumption metering installed, and that's how we can tell any energy that's being consumed we call it behind the meter, basically, solar that is consumed on site before it would go through, say, a net meter. And yes, every single apartment is using the photons from our glorious sun every single day in their own apartments, which is pretty cool. After all, we're not just selling this project to rent it out for just an apartment, but we're also using it as a key point of education about how we really can produce our own energy and consume it within our own homes and store it and save it for later, save it for a cloudy day, evening use. All of that's being in effect, but yes, they are consuming solar real time right there in the site. If they come home from work late and sun's down, their solar energy is stored in the battery. And that's how they've reduced the cost to the property owner and the tenants, is by being able to produce power, store it on site, and consume it on site.
Great. And so I know we are over time. I'm going to do one or two more questions here, and then we're going to wrap things up. And for folks who didn't get their questions answered, please feel free to reach out to folks. We will share your questions with everyone on here, and we can have folks get back to you. But please feel free to reach out directly too. A couple of questions, or a number of questions came in just asking about. There was mention of some incentives or grant funding that was available to help push this project along and help the economics of the project. Questions about how dependent the success or the positive ROI for the project was on those grant funds. Kind of what percentage of the project did they represent, and would it be viable without those funds? If anyone could speak to that.
This is Jason here. I can't speak specifics, but I can tell you that energy storage is not cheap. Return on investment on an energy storage project is it's got to be taken into careful consideration and dynamic thinking. There was definitely money involved from the utility. There was an investment on their part because they had a lot to gain from this project. And I think without that investment, the economics would look very different. It's not impossible. The thing that we all know is that the more batteries we can get deployed is going to drive the cost down in manufacturing. We know this. We saw this happen with solar panels. We know that all the manufacturers are very aware of the cost of their batteries, and they want to drive these costs down. And from my perspective, I only see those costs going down if we can get more systems out into the field. A deployment like this is wonderful. It's good for everybody. It's good for the future buyers of energy storage because of investments like this from all partners. We're helping to drive those costs down and get more systems out into the field.
Great. One last question for Sonnen. So it's a question just about how common this kind of virtual power plant structure is, and both in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. where you guys work, and the software that's being used for the virtual power plant. Is this something that's been commonly deployed in other projects, or is this something that was developed specifically for the Soleil project?
Oh, that's a great question. Of course, as we outlined in the beginning, this is the first development in the U.S. of such a project where we have a signed utility contract. Our e-service group and the sonnen community have been in operation, have been approved by the grid operator for quite a few years now. So sonnen group really has had a chance to refine and optimize the VPP software, different services, optimization services, and that experience we're bringing over here to the US market. Of course, it is really just a pretty new development, so that this is the first implementation that you see. However, it's not going to be the last, so we're working on quite a few projects in various different markets. Of course, the California market is going to be one of the focus areas, but also other areas in the US where we're creating equal partnerships with our local partners. Auric Energy has been a tremendous partner already on advancing some of those projects forward. And so it is the first, but I can guarantee you it's not going to be the last. And we're really excited to implement more virtual power plants, more sonnen communities, benefiting various different markets in the US market. And that's based on our hardware and our software technology.
Great. Thank you, Olaf. So with that, I'm going to think we're going to wrap things up here with the questions. Again, we will share all the unanswered questions with the presenters today, and so they can reach out to you if possible. Thank you to Olaf and Ani and Jason. This was really great information, a really great project. I hand things over to Sam again for some closing thoughts.
Thanks, Seth, and thank you to all of our presenters. So on your screen now, you can see the web address is where you can find more information about Clean Energy Group and the Resilient Power Project. Like I said at the beginning of the webinar, we have recorded the webinar and we'll send you a copy of the recording via email, and we'll also post it on our website, cleanegroup.org/webinars. You can also connect with us on social media. We have our Facebook and Twitter links on the screen, and keep an eye out. We do have some other webinars in the works, some related to energy storage. So keep an eye out. We will send you notices of those via email soon. So that's it for our webinar today. Thank you everyone for attending, and we hope to see you at the next one. Bye.